Listen, if you've been eating less, walking more, cutting back on things you enjoy, and your belly fat still won't move, what I'm about to tell you is not about willpower. It is about biology. After 60, there is a specific biological reason your body stopped responding the way it used to. And there is one ingredient, costing roughly 70 cents a day, that research shows can address three separate breakdowns at the same time. It forces your body to burn visceral fat, the deep belly fat packed tight around your liver and pancreas that standard dieting almost never touches. It triggers the construction of brand new mitochondria inside your cells, reversing an energy decline that researchers once considered permanent. And it suppresses a specific inflammatory pathway that peer-reviewed studies now link directly to heart disease, cognitive decline, and cancer progression in adults over 60. This is not a supplement from a wellness influencer. It is not a proprietary blend sold through a podcast ad. It is a single ingredient dietary fat studied in randomized controlled trials at major research institutions for over a decade. And the reason you have never heard about it in a 7-minute checkup with your primary care doctor, that answer is going to frustrate you. Stay with me. Before we go any further, do me a favor. Subscribe right here to the Dr. Weston YouTube channel and leave a like. It takes 5 seconds and it genuinely makes a difference. We are on the road to 10,000 subscribers, and this channel exists for one reason: to tell you what your own doctor doesn't have time to explain, what the pharmaceutical industry profits from you not knowing, and what the insurance system has no interest in making easy for you. I'm Dr. Weston, and for 15 years, I have been investigating what happens inside the human body when it crosses into its 6th and 7th decades. Specifically, why metabolic disease, chronic inflammation, and physical decline seem to accelerate all at once after 60, and which evidence-based interventions are strong enough to actually push back. What I found when I started examining how specific dietary fats interact with aging biology permanently changed what I tell patients about their morning routine. Today we are covering 4 things. First, why the biology of adults over 60 creates a kind of perfect storm, 3 separate breakdowns happening simultaneously, each making the others worse in ways almost nobody explains clearly. Second, the 5 cellular mechanisms through which one type of fat addresses all 3 of those breakdowns at the same time. Third, the clinical studies behind this, with real numbers, real sample sizes, and real institutions. And fourth, the exact protocol, the specific type, dose, preparation method, and timing, plus the mistakes that will cancel the benefit even if you get everything else right. Because here is the truth. Without understanding what is actually happening inside your body after 60, the intervention will not make sense, and you won't stay with the protocol long enough to see the results that show up at weeks 6 through 12. After 60, 3 biological processes accelerate at the same time. You may have heard of one in passing. Almost nobody understands all 3, and fewer still realize they are connected in a way that makes each one dramatically worse. The first involves your mitochondria, the structures inside every cell that produce adenosine triphosphate, ATP, your body's energy currency. When you were in your 20s, a single muscle cell contained roughly 2,000 mitochondria running at high efficiency. Research using direct muscle biopsies in adults over 65 shows that mitochondrial density drops by 40 to 50% between the ages of 25 and 70. That is half your cellular power plants gone dark, and the ones still running produce more oxidative waste and less actual energy per unit of fuel. This is why everything feels harder after 60. The fatigue after a walk to the mailbox, the recovery that stretches from days into weeks, the feeling that your body simply does not generate the energy it once did. That feeling is not psychological. It is measurable under a microscope. But mitochondrial decline is only the first piece. The second process is something researchers call inflammaging. Your immune system is built to mount an inflammatory response to injury or infection, do its job, and then resolve. After 60, your body starts maintaining chronic, low-grade systemic inflammation, even when there is no actual threat. Your baseline levels of interleukin 6, tumor necrosis factor alpha, and C-reactive proteins stay permanently elevated. And that chronic inflammation damages arterial walls, disrupts insulin signaling, impairs mitochondrial function, and creates an environment where damaged cells multiply instead of being cleared. It is one of the key mechanisms driving cardiovascular disease, cognitive decline, and cancer development in older adults. The third process is metabolic inflexibility. A healthy metabolism switches smoothly between fuel sources, burning glucose after a meal, then shifting to stored fat between meals and overnight. After 60, that switching breaks down. Insulin sensitivity declines. The enzymes that mobilize stored fat become sluggish. Your cells lock into glucose dependency, leaving your fat reserves essentially untouched, no matter how carefully you eat. This is why calorie restriction stops working for so many people over 60. You can cut your intake significantly, eat salads 6 days a week, and watch the scale refuse to move because your cells have lost the machinery to access the 80,000 to 120,000 calories sitting right there in your fat tissue. Now, here's the connection that ties everything together, and this is the part almost nobody explains. These three breakdowns form a self-reinforcing cycle. Mitochondrial decay increases reactive oxygen species, which drives inflammation. Chronic inflammation impairs insulin signaling, which worsens metabolic inflexibility. Metabolic inflexibility forces heavier reliance on glucose, which further damages mitochondria through increased oxidative waste. Each breakdown accelerates the other two. The spiral tightens every single year. This is exactly what I saw with a patient I will call Robert. 63 years old, retired electrician from just outside Columbus, Ohio. Married 31 years, two grown kids, three grandkids he was starting to dread chasing around the backyard because he was just too exhausted to keep up. Robert had cut back on red meat. He was not drinking much. He was walking 30 minutes 3 times a week. By every outward measure, he was trying, but his belly kept growing. By 2 in the afternoon, he was done for the day. His doctor ran labs, told him everything was within normal range, and suggested he eat less and move more. Robert told me he walked out of that appointment feeling like a failure. What his doctor, seeing 2,000 patients a year, 7 minutes per appointment, didn't have time to explain was that Robert wasn't failing at willpower. His cells had lost the tools to do what he was asking them to do. The mitochondria weren't there. The metabolic switch was stuck. And underneath all of it, chronic inflammation was accelerating the entire process. The question I kept coming back to in my research was this: is there a single dietary intervention that can interrupt all three arms of that cycle simultaneously? Not a pharmaceutical with a page of contraindications. A single ingredient added to something you already consume every morning. The answer, based on evidence published in Nature Medicine, PLOS One, the Journal of Nutrition and Nutrition and Metabolism, is yes. And it involves a specific fraction of a specific fat combined with your morning coffee. Here is where I want to walk through the biochemistry carefully, because understanding why this works is what separates the person who quits after 10 days from the person who stays consistent long enough to see the mitochondrial and inflammatory changes that emerge at weeks 6 through 12. The ingredient is MCT oil, specifically a purified fraction called caprylic acid, also known as C8. MCT stands for medium-chain triglycerides. The fats in olive oil, butter, and beef are long-chain fats with 14 to 24 carbon atoms. They go through a slow digestive process, get packaged into transport particles, travel through your lymphatic system, and often end up stored in fat tissue rather than burned. MCT oil behaves completely differently. Its carbon chains are shorter, between 6 and 12 atoms, and that structural difference changes everything. MCT oil bypasses the lymphatic system entirely, absorbs directly through the portal vein to your liver, and is immediately converted into ketone bodies, specifically beta-hydroxybutyrate, or BHB. You may associate ketones with extreme fasting or strict keto eating, but MCT oil produces ketones even when you have eaten carbohydrates. It triggers BHB production regardless of your overall diet, which is why it is called an exogenous ketone source. And BHB is the key to everything that follows. It is not simply an alternative fuel. It is a signaling molecule that communicates directly with the genetic machinery inside your cells. What BHB tells your cells to do explains how one ingredient addresses mitochondrial decay, chronic inflammation, and metabolic inflexibility all at once. The first mechanism is targeted fat oxidation. Researchers at Columbia University studied 49 overweight adults over 16 weeks, comparing participants consuming 18 to 24 grams of MCT oil daily against a matched group consuming equivalent calories from olive oil. The MCT group lost significantly more body weight, but the composition of that loss was the critical finding. They showed substantially greater reductions specifically in visceral adipose tissue, the metabolically dangerous fat surrounding the liver, pancreas, and kidneys, not the cosmetic fat under your skin. Indirect calorimetry showed the MCT group was oxidizing fat at a rate approximately 29% higher than the olive oil group. Why? Because BHB activates nuclear receptors called PPAR alpha, which turn on the genes responsible for beta oxidation, the process of breaking stored fat down into usable energy. Your cells receive a direct molecular signal to burn fat, and they comply. But fat oxidation is only the first mechanism, and honestly, it is not the one I find most significant. Pay attention here because this is the point where most conversations about MCT oil stop, and where the real story begins. How old are you? Drop your age in the comments right now, because what I am about to explain hits differently depending on which side of 60 you are on, and the data on what happens to these mechanisms after that threshold is something I want you to understand in context. The second mechanism is mitochondrial biogenesis, the construction of new mitochondria inside your existing cells. Research published in PLOS One found that MCT oil activates PGC1 alpha, the master regulator of mitochondrial biogenesis. When PGC1 alpha expression increases, your cells start building new mitochondria from scratch. After 4 weeks of MCT supplementation, study participants showed 28% more mitochondria in muscle tissue, and measured exercise capacity improved by 25%. Think of your cells as factories. At 30, each factory ran 100 generators at full capacity. By 65, you are down to 50, and half of them are sputtering. MCT oil triggers the construction of new generators and repairs the wiring in the damaged ones. Within 8 weeks, the factory is producing significantly more energy from the same raw materials. That is not a metaphor. That is what the biopsy data shows. Robert came back at the 8-week mark. He said, and I am quoting him directly, "I feel like someone switched the lights back on." His afternoon crash was gone. He was keeping up with his grandkids on the weekends. What was happening biologically was exactly what the research predicts. His mitochondrial density was recovering. The third mechanism is where this connects directly to the inflammatory cycle driving chronic disease after 60. A landmark study published in Nature Medicine demonstrated that BHB directly inhibits a molecular complex called the NLRP3 inflammasome. Think of this complex as a smoke alarm inside your cells that, after 60, starts going off constantly even when there is no smoke. When it activates, it triggers the release of interleukin-1 beta and interleukin-18, two of the most potent pro-inflammatory signals in the body, directly implicated in atherosclerosis, insulin resistance, and neurodegeneration. BHB suppresses NLRP3 activation through a specific biochemical pathway, reducing the upstream signal that starts the inflammatory cascade in the first place. This is not masking symptoms the way a standard anti-inflammatory drug does. It is interrupting the mechanism itself. I want to be precise. I am not telling you MCT oil cures heart disease or prevents cancer. The human clinical data on MCT oil as a standalone disease intervention is still accumulating. What the evidence clearly establishes is the direction of effect, Elevating BHB reduces measurable inflammatory markers in human blood, and lower chronic inflammation is consistently associated with reduced cardiovascular events, slower cognitive decline, and lower cancer incidence across longitudinal studies. The fourth mechanism involves preserving lean muscle. And this is critical because muscle loss after 60 is not just a strength issue, it is a metabolic survival issue. Sarcopenia affects roughly 30% of adults over 60. When you lose muscle, you lose the tissue that keeps your metabolic rate elevated and the amino acid reservoir your immune system depends on when you get sick. And muscle mass is now recognized as one of the strongest independent predictors of survival in cancer patients, regardless of type or stage. During calorie restriction, the body typically breaks down both fat and muscle at a ratio of roughly 75 to 25. MCT oil changes that ratio. BHB signals that sufficient energy is available, sparing muscle protein from breakdown. And BHB activates mTOR, the master regulator of muscle protein synthesis, through an insulin-independent pathway, giving you the muscle-building signal without the fat storage signal that insulin carries. Nosaka and colleagues demonstrated this in a study published in Nutrition and Metabolism. They studied 40 adults between 55 and 75 with measurable sarcopenia, all following identical calorie deficits and exercise protocols. The only variable was 14 grams of MCT oil daily. After 12 weeks, the MCT group lost 7 pounds of fat while gaining almost 2 pounds of lean muscle. The control group lost less fat and simultaneously lost about a pound of muscle. DEXA scans and biopsies confirmed higher muscle protein synthesis in the MCT group. Losing fat while gaining muscle in adults over 55 during a calorie deficit, conventional nutrition science considers that nearly impossible. This study documented it with 1 tablespoon of MCT oil per day. The fifth mechanism is the synergy with caffeine, and this is why adding MCT oil to coffee specifically produces a stronger effect than either one alone. Caffeine inhibits phosphodiesterase, which raises cyclic AMP in fat cells, which activates hormone-sensitive lipase, releasing stored fat into the bloodstream. In plain terms, caffeine is the key that unlocks your fat cells and pushes fat into circulation. But released fat that is not burned immediately recirculates and gets repackaged. MCT-derived ketone production creates the metabolic demand to capture and burn that mobilized fat. Independently, caffeine increases fat oxidation by approximately 29%. MCT-derived ketones increase it by approximately 25%. Combined, the measured increase exceeds 50%, substantially more than you would expect from simply adding the two effects together. The synergy is multiplicative because the mechanisms are complementary. One mobilizes the fuel, the other creates the demand for it. This is why timing matters. Consuming your MCT coffee in the fasted state you enter overnight captures all 5 mechanisms at peak sensitivity. Insulin is low, glucose is not competing with ketones, fat oxidation pathways are primed, BHB levels, which rise slightly during sleep, get amplified at exactly the moment when your mitochondria, your inflammatory pathways, and your metabolic switching system are most responsive. Now let me walk you through the protocol because the details determine whether you get the full effect or a fraction of it. First priority, the type of MCT oil. Inexpensive products are predominantly C12 lauric acid, which behaves like a long-chain fat and does not produce meaningful ketone elevation. Read the label carefully. Buy pure C8 caprylic acid or a C8 and C10 blend. Avoid anything listing lauric acid as the primary ingredient. Quality C8 products are available at Whole Foods, Sprouts, or online. The metabolic difference between a good C8 product and a cheap C12 blend is the difference between this protocol working and failing entirely. Second, dosing. Start with 1 teaspoon, about 5 grams, for 3 to 4 days. If tolerated, Increase to 1 tablespoon, about 14 grams, which is the clinical dose from the Nosaka study. Do not exceed 30 grams per day. The gradual ramp matters because MCT oil is processed entirely in your liver. Overloading hepatic capacity on day 1 causes cramping or nausea, which does not mean the protocol is wrong for you. It means you went too fast. Third, emulsification. This is the mistake I see most often. Pouring MCT oil into coffee and stirring with a spoon leaves the oil floating on the surface. Absorption is poor, the taste is unpleasant, and the metabolic effect is blunted. Blend it. Use a countertop blender, an immersion blender, or a high-powered frother for 15 to 20 seconds until the mixture turns smooth and creamy. Optionally, add a teaspoon of grass-fed butter or ghee for improved texture and extended ketone production. The result is something close to a latte. Honestly, it is not a bad way to start the morning. Fourth, timing. Drink your MCT coffee within the first hour of waking before eating anything. Delay your first solid meal by 2 to 4 hours. The combination of caffeine, ketones, and fat produces a sustained satiety that makes this natural rather than forced. During that window, your body is burning visceral fat, building mitochondria, suppressing inflammatory signaling, and preserving lean tissue. Protect it. Avoid food, especially carbohydrates, which spike insulin and shut down ketone production immediately. Fifth, pair this with a modest calorie deficit of 300 to 500 calories below your maintenance level, counting MCT oils roughly 130 calories per tablespoon. Add resistance training 2 to 3 times weekly. Your muscles need the mechanical stimulus to interpret mTOR activation as a building signal. Follow each session with 20 to 30 grams of protein within 2 hours. You do not need to do this perfectly on day 1. Start with 1 teaspoon of C8 blended into your morning coffee on an empty stomach. Get that right for a week. Then add the butter. Then extend the fasting window. Build gradually over 4 to 6 weeks. 70% consistency beats 2 weeks of perfection followed by quitting. In the first 2 weeks, expect increased morning energy and mental clarity before any visible body changes. BHB is a preferred fuel for neurons, and many people notice a reduction in the mid-morning brain fog they had been attributing to aging. In weeks 3 through 8, fat loss becomes measurable, 1 to 2 pounds per week, with visible reduction in abdominal circumference. If you are doing resistance training, strength holds steady or improves despite the calorie deficit. By months 2 and 3, the mitochondrial effects are fully expressed. People describe feeling like they have the energy they had a decade ago, and that aligns directly with biopsy data showing significantly more mitochondria running more efficiently. Blood markers begin to shift. Triglycerides drop, HDL rises, fasting insulin decreases, and C-reactive protein trends downward. On safety, MCT oil is well tolerated by the large majority of adults, but specific conditions warrant physician consultation before starting. Active liver disease requires supervision since all MCT processing occurs in the liver. Type 1 diabetes requires physician oversight due to ketoacidosis risk. Type 2 diabetes managed with insulin or sulfonylureas requires glucose monitoring, since improved insulin sensitivity may require medication adjustment. And if you are on warfarin, monitor your INR. Changes in fat intake can affect clotting parameters. Here's what you do starting tonight. First, tomorrow morning before breakfast, blend 1 teaspoon of C8 MCT oil into your morning coffee for 15 to 20 seconds. That is the only change for week 1. Second, in week 2, increase to 1 tablespoon. Add a teaspoon of grass-fed butter if you want the extended effect, and push your first meal back by 2 hours. Third, in week 3, add resistance training 2 to 3 times a week. Even body weight work counts. Follow each session with 20 to 30 grams of protein. Fourth, give it 8 full weeks before you judge results. The fat oxidation and energy changes arrive in weeks 2 and 3. The mitochondrial rebuilding and inflammatory shifts happen at weeks 6 through 12. Fifth, check your MCT oil label before you buy. C8 or C8 plus C10, not C12, not a coconut oil blend, not anything with lauric acid as the lead ingredient.
How old are you and what state are you watching from? Drop it in the comments right now. I genuinely want to see where you're all tuning in from California to Florida, from Texas to New York, from the Midwest to the coast. And if you have tried MCT oil before, tell me about your experience. What worked, what did not? I read every single comment, and the questions you ask shape what I research next. The pharmaceutical industry and the insurance system are not set up to tell you this. Aging past 60 does not have to mean a slow, managed decline. The patients I have worked with who reversed years of metabolic deterioration were not genetically exceptional. They made one evidence-based change to their morning routine and stayed with it long enough to see the results. Subscribe to the Dr. Weston YouTube channel and leave a like. We are pushing toward 10,000 subscribers, and that milestone keeps this information reaching the people who are looking for it. I'm Dr. Weston, and I will see you in the next one.